Time for another fall camp watch along, this time on a Wednesday, August the 9th, 2023. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnLine.com, checking back in with you here midweek. We have more camp footage courtesy of the University of Alabama as the Crimson Tide moves into full pad work as it prepares for its first of two scrimmages, full scrimmages anyway, of the fall camp run here in the month of August. Brutally hot throughout the Southeast. So, as you might expect, a little bit bittersweet for those guys, I got to think, on Wednesday with the arrival of full pads. It's anticipated because, as much as any other time of the preseason, that's when it feels like real football. But yeah, with the temperatures being and the conditions being what they are, the bear will jump on your back fairly quickly. Although technology being what it is these days, certainly helps, but at the end of the day, work is work. And as we start the practice footage here on this Wednesday, we get a look at the defensive backs. We'll dive right into that. And on record as being a big fan of this guy right here as we get things going with the footage. That's Trey Amos. Trey has the look of a very nice pickup for this Alabama football team. There you see him working the back pedal, getting out of that, shuffling, coming up, scooping up the football, kind of a scoop and score drill at the end of this. And that's what you'll see in a lot of these drills as we stop it here at 15 seconds into the footage, is that incorporate as many different things into a drill to get as much out of it as you possibly can. Yeah, we want to work footwork. We want to work football related drills into this stuff, not just the technical aspects of the different positions, but how many times have we heard it from Alabama in this offseason? What have they talked about needing to produce more of on the defensive side of the ball? Turnovers. So you practice turnovers just like you do backpedal, just like you do ball drills or anything else. And so there we see Antonio Kite, the second year corner. He too has made some nice progress. I thought he did some good things. We talked about it before in the A-Day game. Maybe a little bit of a tough break for him in that Trey Amos comes in as a veteran starter at the corner position. So, with Amos in, some scenarios that you have to consider that we'll get more into as we run the footage here. But there's Antonio Kite. And then after Antonio, you got Des Ricks, the early enrollee as a part of the 2023 class, getting in some work as well. And again, these guys exhibit all the critical factors that Nick Saban looks for in a corner. Here comes Earl Little the second. And Earl's been interesting as we stop it at the 32-second mark because came out of spring drills, anticipated to be very much in that mix at the star position specifically. I think that's still the case, but again, you add Amos, which changes the dynamic a little bit, not just at his position, not just where Terrion Arnold is concerned from a competition perspective, but those sub package rolls as we run it here at the 32-second mark. There, Earl does a nice job of scooping. Here comes Kool-Aid McKinstry, a pro in the making right here. As they transition from the fumble recovery drill to going up and getting it, there's Terrion Arnold battling with Trey Amos for that starting base position at the corner opposite of Kool-Aid McKinstry. Terrion, a really, really solid player. Thought over the back half of last season, you saw a little bit of the light go on for him. That's going to continue to need to be the case because I think Amos is still in a great position to push, whether it's base, whether it's nickel, whether it's dime, whether it's all three, for Trey Amos. So Terrion Arnold physically brings a lot to the table. I think one of the things you want to see from him during this season is just more consistency in coverage, making plays on the ball, a comfortability, whether it's zone, whether it's man to man. But as I've talked about before, Trey Amos comes in with that ability to play man coverage, in my opinion, at a very high level. So that's going to be the challenge, I think, for Terrion Arnold in that matchup with Trey Amos at the corner position. We run it here at the 52nd mark, and there's Devontae Smith. Devontae been a little bit of the talk of camp so far, right? At the safety position. And this is where I want to talk about how positions that are separate in the secondary actually can come into play with each other as it relates maybe more so to the star position and the money position. So when you hear me talk about Devontae Smith in connection with Trey Amos, you say, well, Travis, these guys, that's a safety. Devontae Smith's a safety. Trey Amos is a corner. Yes, that is true. That's very true. You were right on with that. However, if Trey Amos proves to be capable of winning that corner position opposite of Kool-Aid McKinstry, then the ability to take Terrion Arnold, perhaps move him inside to star in the nickel and dime, could impact Devontae Smith at the safety position, because if Terrion Arnold's at star, guess who isn't? Malachi Moore. And so if Malachi Moore is the option opposite Caleb Downs at safety, well, that means somebody's got to come off the field. And so that could play out that way. Just giving you an idea, not making a prediction at all in terms of how that'll all play out, just how it connects, whether it's safety, whether it's corner, because like the offensive line, the goal is to get the best 5 or 6 guys on the field together, the best 4 in the base, the best 5 in the nickel, the best 6 when they go to 6 defensive backs. So just something to consider there. And so we look at this guy next up on the tape, Jalen Key. I think he could be similar in that way to Trey Amos, just at the safety position. I think Jalen Key, obviously a veteran guy coming in from UAB, physically looks the part at that size. More of a traditional safety from that perspective, but very fluid in the drill work. A guy that we haven't talked about as much as we stop it here at the 1 minute and 2 second mark is Christian Story. And the last time we did one of these, we saw Christian Story in these individual drills working with a knee support on that was more noticeable than the one we see here in the video. If you notice here, that left knee looked like on Wednesday more of a sleeve apparatus rather than more of a brace like the last time we did this a week ago. So Christian Story's another guy that could impact things at the safety position if he's able to get to full health and really show what he's capable of doing there in that competition. So a lot of different things that can play out. We talk about the versatility of this guy right here, Malachi Moore. Uh, could be a base safety, could be an every down safety, could be the money and the dime. Although I get the sense that the next guy up could be a real factor in that money situation as well in the dime package. But Malachi, with that experience and that versatility, really should come in handy during the upcoming season. And there he is, Caleb Downs. I think Caleb Downs, with his physicality, and as we saw even in the A-Day game, an ability to really run the alley and finish with an emphasis as a tackler. I mean, if you're in your dime package and you're a little bit concerned about being light in the box, Caleb Downs isn't 230 pounds, but he plays with a physicality and a presence that can certainly help you account for some things when you are in the dime and you're worried about maybe being a little light in that situation. There's Jake Pope, second year safety, another promising prospect at the safety position, similar to corner with Trey Amos coming in to sort of bridge the gap, so to speak, to the next wave of corners. That could be the situation with Jalen Key at the safety position and Jake Pope and Bray Hubbard and some of those guys that are in the pipeline. Alabama, as we know, when we look ahead to this 2024 cycle, just a couple of days ago, picking up a big commitment from Payton Woodyard, the 4-star safety out of the state of California. So there's more help on the way as well at the safety position. As we stop the tape here at 1 minute and 22 seconds in, we catch up with the wide receivers. There's Malik Benson. There's Jermaine Burton working on releases here initially. There's Kendrick Law. If Kendrick Law isn't a favorite of yours by now, I don't know when he will be. This guy, we can talk about the X position. We can talk about the Z. We can talk about the Y. Kendrick Law is just one of those guys. He's a football player. It doesn't matter really where you play him. And he might be, if you put together a list of top 5 overall football players on Alabama's roster right now that could do anything that you pretty much ask them, I think Kendrick Law would be a real candidate for that list. And special teams, we know he had 5 tackles on kickoff coverage last year. Did some good things at wide receiver down the stretch of the 2022 season. So you listen to Nick Saban talk about this guy, and it is clear for a second year guy, he has already earned a level of trust that is not common for a young player. So you expect Kendrick Law, again, positionless football, I guess you could say, almost like positionless basketball with Nate Oates. Kind of feels that way with Kendrick Law. You wouldn't be surprised to see him line up at any number of the receiver spots, and who knows, maybe some other places on the field as well. And of course, special teams to go with that. We run it at 126 here. There is Jalen Hale, the true freshman wide receiver from the state of Texas, another guy that back in the spring in the 8A scrimmage, we saw some good things from, did a nice job after the catch, after an over route. Nice ball from Dylan Lonergan back in the 8A game. And nice job of making Bray Hubbard miss in the open field. Got a little extra out of that catch. It's a thick room right now at wide receiver. And Jalen Hale, in terms of body type and some of those things, looks a lot like some previous Alabama wide receivers. We'll see how that rotational status plays out, because right here we're looking at a guy that figures to be right near or at the top of that with Ja'Cory Brooks, Jermaine Burton. We talk about Kendrick Law, Malik Benson. Is he able to sort of expedite his development in time to be a top 3 or 4 guy when the season opener against Middle Tennessee rolls around? He certainly possesses some of the physical attributes that this rotation could use. But in terms of dependability, if there was one guy in this rotation, really two, Kendrick Law would be one, but this guy for me would be one too, Ja'Cory Brooks, as far as dependability. And when things maybe look their most bleak, Ja'Cory Brooks is a guy I'd want to throw the football to. There we see some more technique and route running drills, trying to get guys to stay low at the top of the route before coming out of that route. And there's Shaz Preston. He's another guy, as we're sitting here at the 142 mark, we'll release it. Thick wide receiver, not out of shape by any means, but kind of like Kendrick Law. What's up with these Louisiana guys, right? They got that body type working. Shaz Preston is another guy that we saw in the spring in that mid rotation. You think about guys that he's going to be competing against primarily for a role that is most reasonable to expect from him at wide receiver this season. I think you're talking about Law. I think you're talking about Emmanuel Henderson, maybe Malik Benson in that mix as well. Guys that can really get the job done more so at the X and the Z position. And right now, when I think about Shaz Preston, and when I watch him, I think a guy that can really thrive in the intermediate range. Not that he doesn't have good enough speed, but with that body type and his ability to go up and win contested balls, that's an area where I think you could see him break in the quickest. There's Ja'Cory Brooks. This is a big receiver, 6'2" ish or so. That's not an easy drill for a taller receiver. He works in and out there and comes up with the catch. And now we're going to transition over the defensive side of the ball as we stop it at the 1 minute and 51-second mark. There is Deontae Lawson taking on one of the sleds, working a drill of engagement and then disregard and then get to the football. And that's what Deontay is doing right here. Deontay looks great physically, and that's super to see, because this is a guy, as you see him strike the back there at the end of the drill, has struggled with health issues each of the last 2 seasons. I think that's more the question with Deontay than anything else. I don't think anyone really questions whether or not this guy can get the job done on an every down basis. It's just, will the injury bug leave him alone long enough for him to be able to fulfill his potential? A guy that can run the show there in the middle of the defense. You anticipated that he would be sort of that emerging voice with Henry To'oTo'o moving on to the National Football League. And that looks to be the case. Another really bright young linebacker here in Jahad Campbell. And Jahad, when I look at him and I stop the tape here at 1 minute and 58 seconds into it, as much as anything, through the midsection and his base, it looks like he's made some nice strides physically. Also in his upper body, too. It can be tough. He's a longer kind of guy. I'm not going to say he's sinewy, maybe more of that a year ago. But that's a tough ask between the tackles for some guys with a body type like Jahad, who we know has edge defender in his background. I think that helps him in terms of staying on the field in passing situations, not only because he's athletic enough to drop into coverage and make plays against the pass. You can do some things with him from a pass rush perspective, you would think anyway, given his background. And there is Jahad Campbell's classmate, Sean Murphy, another guy who, I'm not going to say he came to Alabama small by any means, but certainly a little bit light. And it looks like he's done some nice things from that standpoint as well. He'll be right there in that mix. I mean, we didn't see Tresman Marshall in that footage, but Tresman Marshall, another guy, along with Deontae Lawson, along with Jahad Campbell, If I were a betting man right now, those would probably be my top three. I would have Tresman Marshall in there for sure, maybe even as a top two at this point to go along with Deontae Lawson. Deontae would be the every down guy. But then you can get situational if you want. If these tempo offenses will give you an opportunity to get situational anyway, you might be able to do that. As we roll the tape here at the 2 minute and 9 second mark, we're going to check out some outside linebackers working a little hand positioning, a little edge setting work here with the outside linebackers. There's Dallas Turner. Talk about a guy we didn't see in the spring. Very, very good to see Dallas out there in the drill work. Next up, Quandarius Robinson. Q had a really good spring, really good A-Day game. And you saw right there physically another guy that came into Tuscaloosa, similar to Chris Braswell. I believe they were the same class, weren't they? Really in need of bulk and strength. I don't think to the extent that Braswell has put it on. Braswell listed at 255 now. I think Quandarius might be 230, 235-ish. And there's Keon Keeley, the five-star freshman. You talk about physically advanced for a first-year guy. And this is a guy, when I look at him at 6'5-ish or 6'6", it's not all that difficult to think this guy could eventually play at 260, 265 a couple of years down the road. And, this is an area right here, working on some drills, recognition, technique, as it relates more to the run game, especially in the RPO era, because we heard Nick Saban kind of allude to it during his press conference on Wednesday, and how at critical points in the game, if you make mistakes at this position, like Jaden Daniels was able to take advantage of in Baton Rouge last November, you can have a real problem. So to go ahead and establish the awareness, I think Keon's a bright young player, so he should get there relatively quickly. We moved to the defensive lineman. There was Damon Payne. A little bit of a step up year for Damon Payne. Not saying it has to happen for him this year, but with Jamil Burrows no longer a part of the program and rotational spots up for grabs at the base end position and then inside when Alabama goes to more of its nickel and dime looks, there's an opportunity there for the former highly rated recruit in Damon Payne. And speaking of those type of guys, this guy, James Smith, Montgomery, Alabama, there he is working those hands, shedding, getting those eyes inside, getting ready to get off the block and make a play. There is Justin Aboigbe. I am officially on the Justin Aboigbe train. If you've read anything I've written this offseason, if you've seen any of my posts on the roundtable there at BamaOnLine.com, I think Justin Aboigbe is going to have a fantastic final year. If the injuries are going to be a thing of his past, especially coming off that scary injury he had a year ago, this is a guy as a veteran player. And even if the numbers aren't, let's say, 10 sacks or 10 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. I think intangibly what Justin is going to lend to that defensive line and really that defense in general, where you're replacing so much, probably not going to be able to put much of a value on it, but I think he's invaluable from that standpoint. So there you see Tim Kennan. And we talk about a guy that might be poised for a big year relative to what we've seen from him to date, anyway. So much of the talk about the guy behind him there, number 91. And I get it. Jaheim Otis, fantastic as a true freshman a year ago. But this might be a don't you forget about me year for Tim Kennan. A little breakfast club year, maybe, for Tim Kennan. The big man as a base nose tackle, but then maybe in some pass rush situations, he's able to push the pocket and really get into the face of opposing quarterbacks. Next up, we go to the quarterbacks. Speaking of the guys behind center, there is Jalen Milroe getting us going, working with the tight ends, going to throw the quick flip out to CJ Dupree. Coming up next, Ty Simpson. He's going to do the same to freshman tight end Ty Lockwood. Then you've got Tyler Buckner, the Notre Dame transfer, going to do a little quick out cut to Miles Kitzelman. Danny Lewis, as we stop it here at the 3:16 mark of the video, set to go next. And so it's practice. It's an individual period. I've said before, until we come out of that first scrimmage, I don't know, especially if it's UA issued footage, if we're ever going to make too much of the pecking order until we see the guy either listed as the starter going into Middle Tennessee or actually going out onto the field as the starter against Middle Tennessee before we'll put a lot of stock into stuff like this. But you just get the sense right now that probably not a lot has changed through the first nearly week of practice. Now, this is the point for every position where things can start to become a little bit more fluid. Full pad work brings out the best in some guys and reveals the worst in some others. And so, full pad work, the teamwork, the 7-on-7, all that stuff's being charted and broken down on a daily snap to snap basis. So, it heightens up now as you get ready for this upcoming scrimmage. And we have a tendency to say, well, the scrimmage is the biggest thing this week. Well, no, these next few days are going to determine how many reps you get in the scrimmage. So they are extremely big as well. Now, for scrimmage, typically Saban and his staff, they're going to get as many guys, as many reps as they can. The narrowing down process will come from that scrimmage. And then certainly going into the next scrimmage, you'll see a more defined approach to reps and how they're handled. But we're all waiting to see how this quarterback situation plays out. I don't get the sense right now that anyone has taken a big step forward. And I think that's probably good news if you're Jalen Milroe. I don't think Jalen has probably done anything that would put him behind in the race. And at the same time, while there's been flashes from all three guys, I don't think any one of those three have done enough to say, I'm taking over. I'm taking the job this early in camp. It's going to take some time. Nick Saban has told us that. We talked about Tyler Buckner and a little bit of the curb that he's working against coming in as a transfer in the summer. Didn't have spring practice. So he's got that to deal with. So if you were going to look at it right now and based on the video, I wouldn't, again, put too much into it. That being said, I think it probably is right now what we saw in the video from practice on Wednesday, as far as that pecking order or that working order, that organizational grouping, as Nick Saban likes to call it. More of Jalen Milroe as we roll it again at the 320 mark, working with Danny Lewis out there. Danny Lewis figures to be a big part of this offense, at least in terms of a top three tight end in that rotation. Maury Nyblack has certainly been mentioned among those three. CJ Dupree, Robbie Oots coming back from injury. So a lot of guys to consider as we move into the offensive line here at the 327 mark. There is massive Caden Proctor. Caden trying to throw his hat into the ring there at left tackle. Another big dude at left guard. You're going to go ahead and assume that this was more of a second group on the left side with Olas Alinen at that left guard position. Now we see some resistance training that's going on here. The big guys with the resistance bands or the straps around their waist, and that's to help them from a technique perspective, but also it's functional training that they're doing here, so it can also help as far as explosiveness and quickness, balance. Certainly a big part of that. It's things that you basically can't cover when you're training guys in the weight room. This is football related um, training that they're doing right here. And you look at that drill, and there's J.C. Latham. We go back to the other side. There's Caden Proctor, center Seth McLaughlin. I thought Nick Saban had some very interesting comments about McLaughlin post practice on Wednesday. Basically said anything that guy wants to do in life, Seth McLaughlin, he is going to absolutely knock it out of the park. More of the resistance training here with Darian Dalcourt at the left guard position. Darian trying to win that battle with a surging Terrence Ferguson there at left guard. There's James Brockermeyer working, I believe, with the twos at center. Rock Montgomery in there as a young interior offensive lineman. So a lot of guys getting reps. There's Tyler Booker. He made a little bit of headlines earlier in the week with the proclamation of physical dominance, essentially returning to the Alabama offensive line and football team in general. The guy at right guard next to J.C. Latham. There's a very interesting guy at the 408 mark in Terrence Ferguson. And we talked about him last week here on the watch along. And Nick Saban was asked about Terrence post practice on Wednesday and reiterated that the guy has just continued to develop at a very impressive rate. So much so now we're seeing Terrence Ferguson cross train at center. That's not all that uncommon for interior offensive linemen. If you're going to play center, you're probably going to at least get some run at, if you're going to play guard, you're going to get some run at center and vice versa. But, Ferguson's got tackle in his background too. And so this is a guy that if you needed him to, he could help you at all three spots. We talked about Tyler Booker in that regard in the last year or so, but Terrence Ferguson was a really, really good high school tackle. So he has that in his background as well. Saban talked about the continued physical development, and it shows when you see this footage of Terrence Ferguson. He's got that functional power. And you combine that with, say, Tyler Booker at right guard and Seth McLaughlin, who has made some physical gains at the center position. That speaks more to an identity that we've heard associated with this Alabama football team as just about anything else. It starts right there, guard to guard. If you're going to be that kind of team, if you're going to bust people up, you got to be powerful and you got to have an edge there at those interior line positions. You got to have a smart guy at center. Seth McLaughlin can certainly give Alabama that as well. So there's Terrence Ferguson. As we wind things down, Elijah Pritchett, there was a little bit of concern as we watched him here wrapping up the footage about his health coming out of the open practice on Saturday. But here he is working at the left tackle position, getting some reps and that resistance training and uh, as a pass protector. And so good to see him back out there. Of course, you've got Pritchett, you've got Caden Proctor. You still got some young guys at the tackle position. Wilkin Formby can work it left or right. Olas Alinen can kick out the tackle if he needs to. So a lot of things can still play out with that vacancy at the one tackle position. But as of today, good to see Elijah Pritchett back out there and available working with the offense during the workout. That's going to do it for the latest watch along. I hope you've enjoyed it. Travis Reier, the BamaOnLine.com staff. Be sure to join us right there at Bama Online, man. We got so much going on with the recruiting commitments. Just it seems like one day after another. It's flip season, right, for Alabama when it comes to the recruiting trail here of late. Team coverage, we're going to certainly have you taken care of with Charlie Potter doing such a great job as our senior writer. We've got Clint Lamb, we've got Jimmy Stein, we've got myself, Tim Watts, our site publisher, Andrew Bone, Joseph Hastings. The list goes on and on and on. So BamaOnline.com, the place to be with us. And again, thanks for joining us here on the latest watch along. And until next time, so long, everybody.